Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. Many of us navigating the years beyond midlife report high self-acceptance, freedom, and joy. However, there can also be bouts of second-guessing and regret, and the occasional longing to be reminded that you're not alone in this. My guest this week on Vox Novus, Carol Orsborn, says conscious aging can make spiritual seekers growing older both wiser and fiercer. Carol Orsborn is a leader in the conscious aging movement and editor-in-chief of Fierce with Age, the digest of boomer wisdom, inspiration, and spirituality. The author of more than 35 books, including The Spirituality of Age with Robert Webber and Older, Wiser, Fiercer, as well as popular blogs on Huffington Post and BeliefNet.com, she served on the faculties of Georgetown University, Loyola Marymount University, and Pepperdine University. Her website is carolorsborn.com, and she joins me this week to discuss her latest book, Spiritual Aging, Weekly Reflections for Embracing Life. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus Carol Orsborn. Welcome, Carol.
Hey, Victor. It's so good to meet you, and I got a little glimpse of you, so I feel like we're old friends.
There you go. Carol, please share with us your path and how you were called to the wisdom that you share with our world.
Oh, gosh. I'm going to have to go way back because when I was 16, my temple in the North Shore Congregation, Israel, invited me to run the youth group. They decided that it would be great for somebody from the group to call the people back together, and that when we went off to college, when we would come back in the summers, we would gather. And I said, okay, that's fine, but only if you allow me to go visit ashrams and mosques. And the American Theosophical Society was there. I was so curious about everything in the world. And they did. They gave me the van and carte blanche, and I sat at the feet of masters, and it put a taste in my mouth, so that when I got a little bit older, I got to go off on my own to Europe, and I sat at the feet of Krishnamurti, and I was also in an ashram once with Muktananda. So, you know, I was curious, and I didn't settle anywhere in particular, but I absorbed a lot from all over the place.
And specifically about your work with spiritual aging, where did that come in?
Well, I from that point on, I brought spiritual curiosity and growth and learning, and just gathered like a snowball going down, you know, the cliff. I just kept getting bigger and bigger. So I really realized that I needed a new idea about what aging meant to me when I got to university. Actually, I got my master's in theological studies. That was fine. And then I got my doctorate in history and critical theory of religion, and was very interested in spiritual development and also life stage development. So that's what I studied, with the assumption that even though I thought, I didn't know if I was young or old, but I was 49 at the time, I got accepted into the doctorate program at Vanderbilt, and I was still publishing books and articles and giving talks all over the world. I just assumed I would get a tenure track position. But when I turned 50, I couldn't even get an interview. So I aged out, and I had all these expertise, and oh my gosh. At that point, I realized that academia and the scholarly approach to aging hadn't prepared me for the actual experience of aging. And I slipped and slid over or back into the world and realm of mystics, saints, and sages for finishing school. So I have both the academic training about what the scholars say about life stages and our spiritual and psychological development over time. And then I really had my finishing school with the mystics.
We often hear about a lifetime being divided into three acts. The first act is about youth and education, the second act, career and family, and the third act, wisdom, self actualization, and legacy. How do you define the third act, and what inspired your body of work at this time?
Well, that's a very astute question. And, I really love the Hindu conception of the different stages of life. They put it differently, but you go through the householder stage where you are running your family and contributing to society and active and in the mainstream. And then there's multiple stages beyond that of, first you go out into the forest and it's communal and you're there to offer wisdom to the people who come seek you out. And then the stage beyond that is you're not even you're just communing with God. It's just you and your heart, and it's not even communal anymore necessarily. And for me, I I began to understand that aging held the potential to be a spiritual experience. See, when I
Hmm.
started on that track, I thought that I would bring spirituality to aging and make aging more palatable somehow. I didn't understand that for me and for many mystics, aging itself is the spiritual path, is the spiritual training, is the spiritual experience.
Absolutely. Before we discuss your latest book, Spiritual Aging, let's look at some of your earlier works on the topic, starting with The Spirituality of Age, written in conjunction with Dr. Robert L. Weber. What inspired this book, and what do you and Dr. Weber share with readers?
Yeah, that was 10 years ago, and I'm very proud because we won a national award for this work, but we were way ahead of the market. People are waking up now, and I think actually the last election and the disappointment that many of us are feeling in older age that we might not get what we hope to get for out of external reality in this lifetime is going to manifest necessarily. So there's kind of a burgeoning of interest, but back then we were really way showers, our lamp way out ahead of the market. But we met at the American Society of Aging, which God bless them. They're very involved in the social aspects, the medical aspects, caregiving aspects of aging, but not so much into the spiritual aspects. And I was so impressed with this man. He was a psychologist that was from Harvard and was had a big practice and a big reputation. And he was talking about aging as a monastic experience. And I just love that terminology. I was coming up with different terminology of my own. And after his talk, we bumped into each other on a stairwell, as sometimes miraculously happens in life. And I said to him, I would love to know. Uh, I feel called on the one hand to like withdraw from the world right now and really take the time to develop myself. So I was 67 at the time. I'd love to back off and really develop myself spiritually. But on the other hand, I've never known so much, and I feel really called to continue writing books and to contribute. And I expected this wisdom to come out of his mouth. I thought I was just going to sit there and soak it up. And instead he said, "Me too." So that started a dialogue. Actually, we were 65 because we spent 2 years talking to each other every week on the phone. And we turned that dialogue into this book. So the book is questions and answers, the 50 most important questions we think you need to ask yourself from as you're approaching older age. And I think that the richness of the dialogue is that I was a Jewish academic, and he was a former Jesuit psychologist, and I was a woman, and he was a man. I have children, he didn't. So we had a lot of contrasts, and yet there seemed to be a perennial truth that we both kept centering around. And so, neither of us liked the pedantic style of teaching, where the guru model, where, I tell you what aging is and then you do it. And he didn't like that either. So we thought questions and answers and dialoguing and involving people was the best way to kind of stimulate some real change in our society, and certainly for individuals.
Please tell us about your novel, Angelica's Last Breath.
I haven't been asked about that book for a long time. It's a pet book of mine, because the way I learned about aging, I said I studied mystics and sages and people like that. I heard about the book by Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and I probably said that wrong. Ivan Ilyich, I don't know. But I heard that was like the definitive statement of what death and dying is about. And that it was actually taught in medical schools to doctors so that they would have more compassion for people who were in those last stages of life. And so I thought I would read the book, and it's a little book, but it's extremely dense, and it's written about this middle manager in the 1800s who is just this bitter, arrogant guy, and goes through this brutal, long fight against an illness and loses his friends. It's a horrible book, really. But I'll give the ending away. In the end, even he becomes enlightened. It's, after his final breath, or as his final breath is breathing out of him, all of a sudden he understands the whole scope of his life and what it was about, and becomes enlightened. And I thought to myself, wow, a couple of things. Wouldn't it be great and so many hospice workers say the same thing. People get it, but they get it with their last breath. Well, why wait until your last breath? What would it take to have that experience, in your 50s or your 60s, and then live in that place of being beloved and enlightened? And I thought it was all in this book, because he really peels away the masks that separate us from merger with the divine. And but his language is so arcane. I wrote Angelica's Last Breath I put it into a contemporary public relations professional who is, betrayed by one of her clients, and gets diagnosed with breast cancer, and things that I could identify with or actually had gone through. And it was a personally meaningful book for me, because it showed me, page by page, through the eyes of Tolstoy, in my own life, what were the blockages that I was putting up? What was the masks that I was carrying that was preventing me from having this sense of acceptance of aging, and the belief that in the end that it would be this could be this uplifting experience.
Your book, Older, Wiser, Fiercer, is a classic. We can understand the older and wiser, but why fiercer?
Well, I was in a moment of rebellion against the idea of aging gracefully. First of all, I was not aging gracefully. I was kicking and screaming, sometimes in protest against my own aging, but also I was not feeling the serenity that we were promised, at that point. And I think about Gail Sheehy. She wrote the book Passages that marked so many of our, I read that book when I was in my 20s or 30s, and it was my introduction to life stage and spiritual development. And in her book, she gave every life stage. Midlife got 40 pages. Adolescence gets 40 pages. She gets to 60. It's 60 plus. That's it. 60 plus. And she called it the serene 60s. And it got a couple of pages. And I know Gail. She passed, but she and I became friends. And she was not a serene older person. She was the kind of vital, alive, questioning, self looking at her soul, doing life review, all that kind of stuff that keeps us vital until the end. So I just didn't. I didn't. To me, it's older and wiser, yes, but there's something else. And where I got fiercer from was from Florida Scott Maxwell, who was a psychologist. She actually studied with Jung, and she was a therapist. And at the age of 85, 50 years ago, she wrote a book called The Measure of My Days. And in it, she just journaled what it was like to be what I wanted to be someday. She was 85 and more passionate and more alive than ever. But she was also truth telling. She was saying how hard things were and how bad the times were. She wasn't sugarcoating things. And at that time, when I read this book, I can't remember how many years ago it was now, around the time that I wrote Older, Wiser, Fiercer. Um, you know, all the books that were out there in the world were things like, here's how you can stay in midlife forever. Just take more B12. Here's my exercise regime. Here's how to stay positive and happy about aging no matter what. Here's how to control your fate and your future. And, all of those books just felt like they were in denial or romanticizing. And I was craving somebody who would both tell the truth about reality and still have an upbeat idea about what it means to be alive to the very end. And so that's where that notion came from. She uses the word fiercer, and happily, ironically, I discovered later, so did Ram Dass. He also talked a lot about fierceness, being fierce with age.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I shared with you that I turned 72 a couple of weeks ago, and for me, the last 5 years of my life have been probably the most peaceful years of my life because I'm doing things that I enjoy doing. Many of the things that I do help other people, and I'm in love with my wife, and I'm in love with my life and my kids and my family, and I just feel this sense of peace.
Well, Victor, I admire you. I think I think that how can I put this? I have moments like that. I have extended moments like that. But I also get thrown into tumult and chaos. And I have come to realize that my philosophy of spirituality is comes from Florida Scott Maxwell's. It comes to the idea of expanding to embrace the entirety of the human potential. And if I'm peaceful, to be so grateful for that, but not to leave out for me what has become important. I've been through long periods of personal denial where I've just checked out in order to transcend reality. But especially in these times, I can't, it's just breaking for me. And so I say a broken heart is an open heart. And what my heart is open to are some emotions I had previously denied, like righteous anger, bittersweet sadness, um, um, loving myself, even if I feel hopeless at times. So for me, my definition of spirituality comes from those, and there's different schools of mysticism, but the mystics that I follow believe in two major tenets, and that is the first is that you have to accept reality for what it can't help being. Reality is going to spin out of our control, and you have to be able and willing to look it in the face and say, yes, this hurts. This is bad. I don't like this. At the same time, and here's the challenge, is to grow spiritually to the point where you know that even if your life and the world is not behaving the way you wish it would, and that you're stuck in powerlessness, that you are beloved no matter what. So that's more of my reality, especially at this moment.
And I agree with you on that. The thing that changed my life, you and I have the commonality of both having attended the new seminary in New York City many years ago.
Yes.
I attended in the mid to late 90s. You attended in the early 2010s, I think you had said.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And the founder, Rabbi Joseph Gelberman, used to share an expression. There was a Hebrew expression, hakol beseda. The literal translation is everything is in order, but he used to go beyond that. He used to say everything is unfolding in divine order. We may not be able to see it, we may not understand it, we may dislike things that are happening, but ultimately there's a higher purpose in everything that transpired. And when he said that, that teaching changed my life because I started seeing it in everything in my life. And I'm grateful to him for that training.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that a spiritual perspective gives you is the ability to look at long spans of time and not to be so self and egocentric so you think it's all about you. I mean, I think my mistake as a member of the baby boomer generation, and I'm just 5 years older than you. No, I'm a little older. I'm 76, turning 77 next week, actually.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Um, now I can't remember what I was going to say. I got stuck on my birthday. It is this idea that it was all going to. I felt like my life was telling a story, and that was going to have not only my own life, but the world was going to have a happy ending in my lifetime. And I see things in much broader perspective now. Another mystic that I love said, we have to see ourselves as, we're like bricks of a stepping stones. That it's not. We're not the be all and end all. That we are rather the steps upon which the subsequent generations may climb to go to higher heights than we were able to achieve. I mean, our generation did some amazing things. We did some really, really good work, and we can't deny that. But we did have some hubris, I would say, some false optimism. And I think for many of us, that sense that we had the will and the vision to have things work out externally in our lifetime is crumbling. So the question gets to be to look towards people like you, Victor, who are finding some groundedness. I love what you said, some level of acceptance that doesn't deny reality, but transcends it by including it. I love what you said, and I could say that as a witness to my own, I'll call it agony right now. There's moments of agony, but there's two parts of me. One is just bemoaning the state of the world. The other is witnessing bemoaning it, and so in love with myself for being the kind of person that has values that transcend the moment, and to understand that the pain I'm feeling is something that is holy,
Absolutely.
something that this world needs. We are the beacon, we are the light unto the future. And as your rabbi said, it's like we don't know the end of the story yet, but all we can do is be in the present moment, taking care of our spirits, tending our spirits.
Absolutely. And I think you will share with me the sentiment that one of the gifts that we have in this process is extending ourselves to others and extending compassion and kindness and love in a world that so desperately needs it.
Yes, and that comes from that humility that I was talking about. I think a lot of baby boomers, people our age and even younger, are wasting a lot of time in self-flagellation,
Yeah,
looking at where they went wrong, or trying to set these giant purposes and then being disappointed, or bemoaning their limitations. There's just a lot of time being wasted. And I see for me, um, it starts at the grassroots up. And I know that when I had big ambitions and was trying to make a name for myself, both in the business world and then even as a writer. This is my 36th book. So I had those books that coincided with those big ambition years. I would often be too busy to tender everyday kindnesses to the people I encountered. I was too busy, I was, take care of me because I'm an important person. I don't feel that way now. Now, because I've given up on the big picture, I think I'm a much better human being. I will take the time to have a quality conversation and be kind and compassionate. Let the person with fewer groceries get in front of me in line, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And I think, especially in times like these, we have to we we have to be content with living out of our own values at whatever level it's available to us, and it may be a very, very small circle.
I think that you and I and others of our generation and are seeing with spiritual eyes what this world truly needs. And I think that we are harbingers of the good word and harbingers of kindness and compassion. My guest is Carol Orsborn. We're going to be talking about her new book, Spiritual Aging, Weekly Reflections for Embracing Life. Carol, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, first of all, spiritual aging is an easy title to remember, and it's available everywhere, online, in bookstores. If they're not carrying it, tell them to carry it. I am thrilled that the book it's 2 years of weekly readings and reflections. And so it spawned a grassroots movement that is global, which I'm so thrilled about. Because as people are reading this week's reading, they're getting together online or through various organizations and online at my excuse me, I'm on Substack. So spiritualaging.substack.com is where people are having an online spiritual aging study and support group where they're reading this week's reading and then conversing 24/7 as they're available to. And I cannot believe the vitality of the conversations that are going on because, the rumor or the stereotypes of aging is that we're isolated. And it's true, those of us who are on the cutting edge of spirituality are having a hard time finding each other. And so it's like on my website, and also there's an organization called Saging International. That's SAGE-ING. And there's various other organizations where people are actually coming together globally on Zoom. And there is such a collective sigh of relief that we don't have to do aging alone, and that we can support one another in making aging a spiritual experience. And if you can't remember any of those, hopefully my name will be somewhere on your website. And just go to carolorsborn.com, which is an entryway into all these things that I'm involved with.
And we'll be back with more of Carol after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Carol Orsborn. We're going to be talking about her brand new book, Spiritual Aging, Weekly Reflections for Embracing Life. Congratulations on Spiritual Aging. Thank you very much for bringing it to us. We need this book.
Thank you. I accept your congratulations. I'm at a point in my life where I'm willing to give myself credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. You created this book, as you had mentioned in the first segment, as a series of 120 bite-sized weekly readings. What inspired the book and the concept of the weekly readings?
Well, I wrote the book that I needed and wanted because I've discovered that for me, spiritual growth is cyclical or maybe a spiral, sort of a spiraling deeper. But I keep on touching on the same topics. And because I journal a lot, I can look back at a journal I did 10 years ago and read something that I discovered and thought I was going to know forever, some spiritual breakthrough or discovery or insight, and realize I had just written down the same thing last week. So, it's like, oh my God, I realized that 10 years ago, and here it's 10 years later, and I thought this was a brand new discovery. So, I know that I need reminders. I know that I know things. And so I don't think of this book as teaching new things. I think of it as a reminder for those of us who have been on the spiritual path for some time of what it is that we know, and every moment is like a hologram. It's like you can look at it from a prismatic. Every single angle you look at it contains the whole. And so there's a real synchronicity in this book. I wrote the book. My last writing on it takes about a year or two of promotion, putting it together, publication, marketing. 2 years ago, way before what's going on now, and it's so thrilling to me when I open the book and there's a reading, and it's incredibly pertinent to what we need to know right now. Like I noticed the first week of February, where we're just approaching, is called, broken heart or open heart. And, it's how we learn from the things that break our heart. And there's plenty around the world to break our heart right now. And how do you turn that into spiritual deepening? So it's been pretty interesting how the weekly readings have reflected a reality as it's unfolding.
And this is 2 years worth, 120 readings. Why only 2 years worth?
Oh my God. I'm human. The book is 364 pages as it is, Um, but the discovery I had, first I did a year's worth of reading and I thought, no, I'm still hungry, I want more. And so I wrote the second year. And at that point I felt full. I don't know how to describe it. I felt done. And then I thought, what helps me feel done is the notion of cycles, that what I want to do now is, it's been 2 years since I wrote the first reading. I'm ready to go revisit that again. So you're meant to get to the end of this book and then start over again. So don't think of it as first year, second year, and then you're done. Thinking of it as living the rest of your life in 2 year cycles.
So maybe there'll be a sequel.
Well, the sequel is, and I'm still writing, but it's a study guide to the book. And I'm posting them as we go at my Substack, at spiritualaging.substack.com. So there are reflections based on the reflection, discussion questions and spiritual exercises. And a lot of people are getting together with 3 or 4 friends, and maybe it used to be their book club, but they want to go deeper, or they're taking it to their temple or church, or they're at their senior center, or even some people are at senior living facilities. And the book is it just leads you from one week to another with plenty of stuff to talk about. But if you go onto my website, then you get the study guide, and you can go that much deeper. So. I've already thought this through. I haven't done all the study guides for the second year, so I'm doing those now, and I think I'm just going to continue to run these for the rest of my life. Because where the excitement for me right now is on the comments and discussion that's taking place, online and in these Zoom groups. Not so much what I'm saying as what it is generating in terms of discussion between people.
In addition to your personal wisdom and experience, who else do you call upon in spiritual aging?
Right now, I'm learning from, I joined, they're called spiritual aging study and support groups. And these are these small pods of between, you and a best friend to, I think the largest is about 10 people. And then once a month, I lead a group for saging that has like 75 people. But then it breaks up into smaller groups. It's learning from each other. I think that we are on the cutting edge of something new. At the break, we were talking about the fact that there's so many of our generation that are breaking new ground spiritually. in terms of deepening and getting over spirituality as an egotistical, I'm going to teach you how to do this thing called transcendence and be happy forever. I think there's a real deepening going on, and I think we're challenging ourselves against real world challenges. And so, for me, a teacher would be there's a woman that responded to my comments today on my study guide who said something like, somebody said, I asked the question, what are you hoping for? And she said, I'm hoping for good health for myself and my family. And somebody else responded, I hoped for that too, but I have a terminal disease. So now what I hope for is to be beloved no matter what. So, it's like, I think of us as spiritual warriors or adventurers, on the cusp of new learning, and we're sharing it with each other as we go. But that doesn't say I don't have way showers. So my main influences would be Florida Scott Maxwell, who I talked about earlier, Ram Dass, who I mentioned earlier, Reb Zalman, who was the founder of Saging. He wrote this wonderful book called From Aging to Saging. There's in the back of my book, Spiritual Aging, is all my sources and influences, and it goes on for 4 or 5 pages. So that would be, or my website. I also, I've run spiritual aging book clubs for a number of years. And so on my website are the books that I've read with reflection questions. So that's a great resource for people.
I had shared that my spiritual teacher, the founder of the new seminary, Rabbi Joseph Gelberman, taught us many wonderful things. And one of the things that he shared was that the 11th commandment should have said, "Thou shalt have purpose." What is your sense of purpose in the third act?
I love it, but I'm very easily satisfied. I have to say, I'm not. I spent many years looking for grand purpose. I was one of those people, honest to God, who believed I could change the world by myself through my writing and being. So, because I came out of the box with so much hubris around that and went as big as I possibly could. I remember the first book I wrote, I thought was going to change the world. It was a book called Enough is Enough, Exploding the Myth of Having It All. I thought I would write this book and then all of my peers would suddenly put value above accumulation and understand the importance of simplicity and having values, all that. And it did. It sold a lot of books, but no, the world didn't change. So I started out with grand purpose and grand disappointment, and struggled with it for many years until I seriously started in on the aging process. And at that point, I had a breakthrough of enlightenment that had to do with understanding that my purpose was living my life every day as I was living it out of my values. And how I was practicing my values in real life in the present moment, not in some future idealized future. And the realization, I know that you're involved with, you've written a book about the blessing of animals and spiritual animals and things like that.
Yes.
So yeah, my breakthrough came while I was at the new seminary studying for my spiritual certificate in coaching and counseling. Because we were living in New York City and my husband had a big job. He was off every day and it was just me and my dog. And I had just left my big position. So it was new for me to have this time both to mull and dread and think about the future and my age and all that. But also I had a lot of time with my dog. So I wrote a dog at that point that was called Fierce with Age, Chasing God and Squirrels in Williamsburg. Because that's what we did all day long. My dog and I bonded. And by the end of that year, I came up with this sort of breakthrough notion for me that the purpose of my life that it's enough just to make one dog happy. And so anything beyond that was a bonus. And since I've always had dogs since then, I've had a pretty happy life from that point of view.
It's interesting that you had talked about make one dog happy. And one of the things that I've personally found, when I put something out there, be it a piece of writing or some advice or consoling someone, I never do it with the intent. I do it because it's the right thing to do, and spiritually for me, it's the right thing to do. And I never look for feedback. And once in a while, you get an email, or you get a letter, or you get a comment from someone that says, that time that you spoke to me, or that time that you counseled me, or that time that you listened to me, especially the listening, was life-changing. In that life-changing moment, you may have changed one person, but you've also changed the world, and you've done that.
Yeah, for me, the greatest spiritual gift of older age is freedom from seeking approval.
Absolutely.
I I would if I had had that earlier in life, that would have been I would have done things differently. But I personally think that getting beyond seeking approval is the purpose and the meaning of older age. That every life stage has its meaning and purpose. And we talked earlier about the householder. You know, I think that when we're born, I think there's a certain amount of we need to seek approval. We're human and we have psychologies that are molded by the previous generation. There's a certain amount of fitting in that's required to get a society to function, you know. But what joy there is to get to the age or stage in life when that's what it's not about anymore. And you may be doing things that accidentally get approval, but it's not what you're aiming for. You know, I call us truth tellers and spiritual warriors.
There you go. Absolutely. My guest is Carol Orsborn. Her book, Spiritual Aging, Weekly Reflections for Embracing Life. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Let's breathe. Deep inhale. Extend your spine. Exhale very slowly. Find mental health resources at loveyourmindtoday.org. This message is brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute and the Ed Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Carol Orsborn. Her book, Spiritual Aging, Weekly Reflections for Embracing Life. Carol, many of us have lost parents and brothers and sisters and dear friends as we enter into our late 60s and 70s. What do you offer for those who are grieving?
I'm grieving too. So, you know, the question is not that you don't allow yourself a period of grieving and not that the sadness will ever go away, but trying to find that moment when you can start moving back into the world again without leaving the loss behind. So I have a spiritual practice that I myself have used when I've been in the heat of my grieving and had to still function in the world. And again, there's sadnesses that I'll never leave behind. I call it a light a crying candle. And that is after, you know, you have to devote yourself full time to your grieving. People that don't take that time to really go through it thoroughly, it will just haunt them in an unfinished way. But for those of us who do recognize that moment, what you can do is say, okay, I am not completely done with my grieving, but I know I have to function again. I have to make a living, or I have kids to raise, or, you know, whatever, or it's just time, you know. So I say buy a candle as big as your grief. And some of them are big floor jobs, you know, if you've seen those candles that are like 3 or 4 feet tall. And then determine to yourself how much of your life you're going to give to this a day. So some griefs require an hour or more a day. Some are not that big and maybe 15 minutes a day. And then you light that candle for that amount of time, set a timer, and let yourself feel those feelings fully. And then when that hour is done or the 15 minutes are done, you blow out the candle and get on with your life as best you can. And then the next day you do the same thing until the candle's burned.
And there's no right way or wrong way to grieve. It's an individual process.
Oh, yes. And I'd like to expand on that and just say there's also no right or wrong way to age, and there's no right or wrong way to die.
Mm,
I love the
absolutely.
story from Ram Dass. He said that the people that had the hardest problems, the spiritual people who had the hardest times with death and dying, are the ones who thought that because they had done so much spiritual work, they should just be able to gracefully fade away at their deathbed in a sense of tranquility and peace. And when instead they were crying out in pain or pissed off at God or whatever, um, they would also turn against themselves, feeling like they weren't dying right. And so I think that that's a lesson for all of us, really, that we have to, however you're showing up today, accepting yourself means if you're angry, you accept that you're angry, you're still angry. The only thing that changes is you add a witness to it that can observe yourself being angry. And with that, you can extend love to yourself and say, yes, I'm angry and I don't like being angry, but I can love myself in this anger, as opposed to turning yourself against yourself and having second doubts about your spirituality, and regret and all that. But then, you even have to, there's times when you're going to have to witness yourself having second doubts and regrets, second guessing yourself. So, and then you have to love yourself too. So to me, that's what the spiritual journey is at an older age, is learning how to feel beloved no matter what, and to extend that to your own self, to grow in that direction, and to love yourself when you're not there yet.
Yeah. And to that extent, one of the challenges for many in all stages of life is forgiveness, to offer and to ask for it. How do you approach forgiveness?
Well, I'm a beginner on forgiveness. I'll just say I have a lot more to learn, because for me, the line between forgiveness and complacency is very thin. And I can sometimes use forgiveness as a place to go to not rise to oppose forces that I feel called to oppose. So it's a spiritual or moral laziness. I understand that. If I go deep enough, and I'm talking way, way deep, I can think of the most odious people in current times in history and have compassion for what it must be like to be them, to have been raised in such a way that they can inflict so much evil seemingly without conscience. And there's a certain kind of forgiveness or understanding on that level, but I cannot use that as an excuse to override when I'm being called to stand up to evil. So it's a slippery slope. And like I said, I'm a beginner. And sometimes I think I better be very careful about forgiving prematurely if it's not sincere on my part, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm talking more about interpersonal forgiveness. One of the things that I've shared at memorial ceremonies and funerals is that tomorrow is never guaranteed. If you love someone, tell them today. If you feel that someone has hurt you in some way, try and forgive them today. And if you feel you've hurt for someone, ask for forgiveness today, because tomorrow is never guaranteed.
Oh, God, that's gorgeous. I just got a shiver down my spine. Well, it does remind me of the 12-step programs.
Mm.
And I have been a part of the 12-step programs. A lot of my spirituality, it comes from many, many streams, but Al-Anon has been a big contributor. Al-Anon, the way I experience and define it, is for people who love other people too much and perhaps unwisely, not understanding what real love is. But inherent in moving forward in life is acknowledging what when you're holding grudges and seeing that as a character flaw, and then the serenity prayer, trying to rectify what you can and accept what you can't. And for me, the hardest part of forgiveness is the third part, which is, the knowing the difference. What are the things that we should go out and try and fix, and what are the things that we need to forgive and accept. So that to me is a lifelong learning. But I couldn't agree with you more. That's beautiful what you say.
Thank you. I've adopted a practice of daily gratitude, expressing it to those who have extended kindness, and for virtually everything in my life. What do you see as the blessings of gratitude?
I'm feeling more and more God's presence coming through people and things and circumstances. Complete strangers. I feel like God is like using the world and the universe to say, "Atta girl, keep at it." You did it at the break. I was talking about something I'm personally scared about having to do with headline news. And what did you say to me? Keep the faith, basically.
Keep the faith.
Yeah, Victor, that was just a gift. It's like, and like I said, it's not like I don't know these things. It's just that in the moment we forget. And so I'll just say, in this moment, I'm very grateful for this, for you and what you said, but also this whole conversation. It's lifting my spirits out of a place this morning where I was really more reactive to the world. So. But I would have to say that I think my spiritual practice, thank God, includes, I have certain friends I talk to and I just commit in advance. I know we're going to talk every Tuesday or whatever. Certain groups that I go to, like I mentioned Al-Anon, that I go to on a regular basis, certain readings. I have peppered my life with wake-up tools and reminder tools. Again, you ask, why did I write this book? That's what spiritual aging is. It's like I need things in my life to keep me awake. Otherwise, I go into a reactive space. And what a way to start the week with this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there one reading that you have personally found beneficial?
Knowing that this book I was asking people to devote a whole week of their lives to each of these readings. I tried to make each one my favorite, if you know what I mean. It's like I didn't want people to come to the clunky week where I didn't really care that much. So what I did is I was thinking that you might ask something like this. And so I just looked at the first week of February of year one. And this is a reading about open heart versus, is there a difference between a broken heart and an open heart? Are they the same? So that's a reading I would suggest people take a look at.
What would you like readers to take away from spiritual aging?
First of all, that you don't have to do aging alone. And if you are in a dreading, reactive, self-punishing, hanging on, denial, brittle place, any of those things, that growing towards the kind of perspective you and I have been talking about is a choice. You have heard this hour, and there are lots of resources, not only my own book, not only your shows, but as I mentioned, page after page of book references, both in this book and on my website. It's your choice. And if you're one of those people that are saying, well, that's true for you or everybody, but here's my exception. I've got to tell you, everybody has an exception. Somebody says they're too sick, or somebody says they don't have enough money, or somebody says that it won't work for them because they're too lonely or whatever. It's like, just know that everybody who's doing this work could use something as their exception. And don't. Just take the leap of faith that there is another way to hold your life, no matter how daunting a task it seems to you right now. You are not alone. Go find other people that were in your spot and got to the other side of it. We are growing together. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. There's no right way to do it. But you will be inspired by the people of our generation and generations before who are waking up to a new vision of aging that is meaningful and purposeful in and of itself, regardless of external circumstances and regardless of what is happening to you right now.
The wisdom of Carol Orsborn, her book, Spiritual Aging, Weekly Reflections for Embracing Life. Carol, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you.
Okay, thank you. The book is called Spiritual Aging. Very easy to remember. You can find it anywhere online. Amazon, of course, where it debuted at #1 on the aging and self-help list, which I'm very proud of. But your local retailer can order it for you. Anywhere you get your books, Spiritual Aging. The other resources that I talked about, you can subscribe for free to my online presence at spiritualaging.substack.com. And if you join our paid membership, then you'll get the weekly study guides and join the group online that's conversing. You can also go to Saging International, that's SAGE-ING, Saging International, and join online Zoom groups that I'm leading and also that are being led locally around the world, small groups of 10 on Zoom. And if you don't remember any of this, just go to carolorsborn.com. And just remember that my name has an R in it, so it's ORSBORN, carolorsborn.com. And that will be a conduit to news and linking up to everything.
Carol, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this wisdom, which is so needed in our world today. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I think I did tell you about how you lifted my day to day. So I will listen again when this runs, and maybe multiple times. So thank you, Victor.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.